So thank you very much, everybody, for coming along today. So, as Kathy said, this is part 2, so it's a follow-up on the session Dawn ran last month. So there's lots of people registered, so obviously that hit a button. And today we're going to talk more about the technology that sits behind some of the things we discussed last week. So very quickly, I'll let Dawn introduce herself, and then I'll introduce myself, because most of this is going to be me this week talking.
Yep, absolutely, Rick. Thank you. You all got to listen to me drone on, I guess, the last month, but this is Dawn Stevens. I am the president, owner of ComTech, and the director of CIDM. And I also teach the taxonomy class that Kathy was talking about that's coming up. So I encourage you to get in touch with us if you're interested in that. But otherwise, I'm pretty much going to sit in the background until we get to the question and answers. Maybe I'll answer some questions, but largely this is all for Rick. So take it away, Rick.
Yeah, I'm beginning to regret how easy it was for me last time when I did this, because I got to sit there and listen to you. But as was mentioned, I work for Bluestream, but I'm not going to talk very much about Bluestream. I might show you a little bit at the end, dependent on time of how you can support all these things from within a CCMS. But I've worked with DITA for 14, 15 years now on lots of projects, and I've dealt with lots of technologies and worked with different technologies over the years. So this will be some anecdotal experiences and talk about what we can do in this wonderful field. So as was mentioned, there is a recording, and this is just our technology part. So when we were talking before we started out, and I'm going to use some of Dawn's slides throughout here, just because it's going to be easier to reference them. And I think most of the people here were either at the first session or perhaps have actually watched one of the recordings that's available online. So we just go back and look at, I'm just trying to make some real estate. So we said that in terms of the spectrum for a taxonomy, we're going from a controlled vocabulary right way through to relational ontologies. But the first thing I thought I'd do is actually have a look at Gartner's magic quadrant for metadata management. And there's lots of companies in here, IBM, obviously with Watson and things, Smart Logic, we know, but a lot of these companies don't generally sort of work in the same area as we do when we're working primarily with DITA, apart from the one company here, the Semantic Web Company. And you may know that as the Semantic Web Company, but it's probably more likely that you're familiar with them as they're better known as Pool Party. So let's look at Pool Party, because I think they are a leading, as per the Gartner chart, they are actually a leading company in this area, and they've got a very extensive product. There's lots of components to it. There's good support for taxonomy and ontologies within there. But this also offers up another area that we didn't quite touch on yesterday when we were talking about this whole spectrum from a controlled vocabulary through to an ontology. And this is this idea of knowledge graphs. And some people may have come across knowledge graphs, but I'm guessing that a lot of people on here may not be familiar with knowledge graphs. And they become quite important as we're progressing through developing our metadata strategies in order to progress and actually do all the good things that having good metadata has. Because let's not forget, if we don't do the metadata properly, people aren't going to find content as easily as if you do the metadata properly. So this idea of a knowledge graph, and there's a little sample there, is it's a concept where you have a digital structure that represents knowledge as concepts, and you're showing the relationships between them. Now, it can link to an ontology, but it also allows both humans and machines to understand things and how they're related to each other, sort of what's going on. Towards the end of this, and I'll talk about the difference between knowledge graphs and ontologies, because at first glance, if you've seen a diagram of an ontology and you look at this, you'll suddenly think they're the same thing, but there must be a difference there. So there is very much a difference, and that's what I will talk about. But knowledge graphs are it's very well supported within Pool Party, and one of the questions that came up during the part 1 of this session, when Dawn was speaking, it was, can you tell us some books or reading material that people should be looking at? And one of the books in our list that I'll share at the end is by Andreas Blumeyer, who's the CEO of the Semantic Web Company, and it is all about knowledge graphs. So it's also available free if you know where to look. So we will get on to that. But working through this from the start, so we started with this idea of a controlled vocabulary in order to just actually make things better easily. And DITA's about reuse, so excuse quite a bit of plagiarism here, and plagiarism saves time. So again, Dawn's slide from before, talking about what is a controlled vocabulary. So it's mandated, it's predefined, it's all there. And an example was the Dublin Core metadata standard. And we have these advantages. It makes writing so much easier, particularly in a large organization where you've got multiple authors are creating content. You want to try and take some of the personality out of the writing. Technical writing is a little bit dry. We're not doing it because we actually want to be the next Stephen King, although I suspect most technical authors would like to have the money of J.K. Rowling or someone who writes more flowery language. But in terms of what we're trying to achieve with technical documentation, a controlled vocabulary is very, very important. And there's these massive savings when it comes to localization and translation. So we start with our controlled vocabulary as the very first step on our journey. And we can look at some of the software products that are available for a controlled vocabulary and actually what they do. So you can see there, I've pulled out 4. There's more than 4, but these are probably 4 of the top controlled vocabulary software solutions that are out there. Now, so we have Acrolinx has been around for a long time. It's a German product. It's out of Berlin, so I think people would have heard of Acrolinx. Most of these products will work very similar in the way that they work. Pool Party is perhaps a little bit different, but certainly Acrolinx, Congree, and Grammarly are very similar in their approach. We'll have some screenshots. Congree is a newer player on the field. Again, it's a German or Austrian company, but I'm hearing some very good things about them from some people who've been working with them recently. So if you are looking for some controlled vocabulary software, if you start with those 4 that are listed there, you're going to be starting from the right place. Now, what do they do? So obviously, I mean, we all use Microsoft Word. We may love it. Most people who write more than 4 pages hate it, but it is used. And we're used to these grammar hints and these spelling checks and these things like that. But these products also let you create a style for your company. So the way you want to write. It lets you build up a group sets of terminology to reuse. So you're always referring things in the same way. You're using the same abbreviations. But then also look up, because they provide an interface into the authoring application, be it you're using Oxygen or FrameMaker or Word. What they're doing is they're looking as you are typing, and they're looking back at the data that they've got stored and suggesting changes. And that's how we're actually going to start creating this more consistent feel to the language of the authoring, particularly if you've got multiple authors. We're all going to start using the same phrases. And again, that gives you this knock-on effect of when it comes to localization, much cheaper. That phrase is already translated into 27 languages. Why would you change it? So you start bringing in these consistent terminology, and that's the idea of DITA is that we share content, we reuse content. So these are helping you use DITA more intelligently. Your end product is going to be better if you follow this route. If you look at this, it's a screenshot of concrete, but I could have shown a screenshot of acrylics. It would be very similar in what it's doing. So we've got here, there's no spelling mistakes, it's picking up some terminology, REIT, headphone, headset. And this looks like it's been taken, I suspect, out of Oxygen. So you can see, and it's giving you a score as you go along. So it's actually helpful to the authors, and in my opinion, it's not invasive. It's just sitting there at the side, and hold on, just need to look right. So it's actually helping you improve the way that you write. But there are other products out there, and they vary in functionality of what you can achieve within the system. So when you're looking at this type of software, what you need to do is you need to think about how you're going to use it. This is the same with all of the things along here, is you need to understand how you want to use the software. So you do your use cases, you do your user stories type thing. You talk with people like CIDM and say, we're thinking of getting some software. What would you recommend? And that first thing they're going to say is, how do you want to use it? So you need to think about this, and then you need to look at it and you test it and make sure you can create your own thing and work with it the way you want to work with it. So the second thing, as we moved along our road from start to finish, we came along synonym rings. And again, why do we need these synonym rings? Why we created a word that I can hardly pronounce. But again, they're there, they're useful, and it's going to help you find content. So it's more powerful for the end users, because they're going to search on a term when it may not be the term that you use. So you want to make sure that the user experience is as good as possible, and to make the user experience as good as possible, you need to be considering how your end users are going to interact with the information that you're creating. So in terms of the software side here, so synonym rings, there's not really that I can find, or I've ever, certainly not that I've ever come across, software specifically used to create synonyms. If someone has found one, then please let us know, because it would be useful on occasions. So it's more of functionality that you would address within the CCMS. It's something that we support within XDocs, and I can show you that later. And obviously within DITA, there is a place to put in your synonyms if you're using DITA. If you're not using DITA, I'm not sure how you would do it, but it's certainly there's an element there where you can actually put that in. There are sites that will give you suggested terms. So it could be, if you don't know what the synonyms are, there are websites where you can actually put in a word and it will give you various equivalents that you may wish to use if you're unsure of. But on the whole, I would say that if we're looking at synonyms, that's more of a CCMS function than a standalone one. Now, our traditional taxonomy, excuse me whilst I sip tea. Is our traditional, this hierarchical, it's sort of flat structure where you're drilling down, you're starting with a very specific term, and then you're moving down, and it's easily read, it's easily understood, and it's giving you this relationship. So this particular one where we're starting with Honda, trucks, cars, vans, motorcycles, and then you drill down into models and then into sound. So it's a very simple relationship, but it helps the users understand things. It helps you get to where you want to get. So it's out there. So you need to define your hierarchy from top to bottom. And obviously there were again, there's the other example from before is the advantages. So it's adding structure and context, and it's showing these relationships, and it's very easy to understand. So if we were to move forward again and look at the support for taxonomies, this is something that can be addressed by the CCMS. So the CCMS should be able to support this quite easily, depending on which CCMS you use. I'm more familiar with some than others, but it should be. There should be something that you are looking at. It's also supported on some of the control vocabulary software tools. There's some comments that we've seen that maybe some of them don't do some of the things. It's a moving feast with the functionality of some of these tools. So more functionality is being added all the time, but it certainly with something like Full Party, you will find that there is some support there. I came across a product whilst doing some research into this called Unilexicon. The link is there. That's a good tool. That helps you here building up your taxonomy. So if this session is being recorded, so at the end you'll be able to go through and look at the slides, even if you're just going through the slides and clicking on the hyperlinks that I've put in, just for looking for more information about the various companies, what they do. Or again, send any questions that you have through to Dawn, through to me, and we'll do our best to answer them and help steer you in the right direction. It used to be quite fun when I used to sell lots of different systems. I could move between one and the other, but I don't do that quite so much anymore. So we started off with our control vocabulary, and we're moving along nicely, and we're looking at all these the different tools and what they can support moving forward. But we moved on. We looked at first taxonomies, but then we get this idea of a thesaurus, and I must be a little bit geeky, but I love the dinosaur joke, so I've left that in as well. So one of the examples here, it's actually, what if someone else mentioned some words, like pool, for example, is it a swimming pool, a pool table, or a secretarial pool? So it's important that we actually think about these terms and how they're related and how we use them. And there are these advantages that we showed again before, quite a bit with cars. We've got a Honda Civic has turned up again for the second time. But we're identifying relationships here, but not always obvious to the end users. So you have to do a fair amount of thinking on behalf of your end users in order for the content that you're creating, so is giving them the experience that they expect. So this is putting more thought into what you're creating, how you're marking up content, and how people are going to discover this content and improve that experience as you go along. It's all very important here. But so with Thesaurus, again, if you look at the software that can do this going to support you, the control vocabulary software will support, or should support, your Thesaurus. Your CCMS should support the concepts of a Thesaurus. And the product that I have come across is called Protégé, which also will support Ontologies, which is where we're going to next, which is at the far end of this journey, which I've probably rushed through far too quickly. But Protégé is a very good product, and that again will support your Thesaurus. One advantage of me rushing through this is we'll have lots of time for questions at the end. So like I say, certainly within XDocs we have Thesaurus support, and within Acrolinks you have Thesaurus support. So the idea of an ontology, so we've gone from control vocabulary, which is controlling how people write. It's actually making sure we're getting the terminology correct. We then move on to an ontology, which sometimes I think of it as almost a 3D taxonomy. So where a taxonomy is flat, an ontology is letting you join other things together. It's almost joining taxonomies together to make a three-dimensional image. So, we know here that a lemon is a fruit and fruit grows on trees, so a lemon must grow on trees. So it's joining up these links of how things go together, and it's massively important when you come to searching, because you're adding a huge amount of intelligence to your content. If you're a DIY shop and you've got a taxonomy of tools, for example, if you start using Ontology and you have people with certain tradesmen and you have seasons of the year, so if someone's going onto the website and you know what their trade is and you know what the time of the year is, you can start showing them tools that reflect what they're likely to be interested in at that time. It's making the whole thing more interactive, and I keep saying user experience, but user experience is so important. Bounce rates when people can't find things on the web, and if we don't get any of this stuff right, and we don't start thinking about how we're creating our content, how we're adding metadata to our content, how we're controlling that metadata, how we're controlling the language that we're using, the way content is growing, the amount of data that is going out into the web no one's going to find anything. That is my big concern, because we don't find things. I think everybody would probably accept that if you go searching on Google now, other search engines are available. We go searching for content, it's much harder to find what you're looking for. Certainly, there's things here, even doing a presentation like this, there's certain search terms that don't return anything. You know, I can't, if you do a search for content management tool or something, you'll get thousands. If you look for metadata management, you get some strange things come up, and that's why people are paying for adverts, to get their content on the first page of the Google or other search engine is available list. If you're not getting your content right, people can't find it. And it's a problem post-sales. If someone's looking for an answer, they've lost the manual. Or like me, as I get older, you buy a watch and they send you a 1-inch thick guide for the watch that you've just bought, but it's 2 inches by 1 inch and written in text so small that you can't read. So you search online and pull up a PDF just so that you can find out how to work the thing that you've just bought. If I can't find the instruction online, then I'm going to start thinking, well, actually, I brought that from Amazon, I can send it back. So we have to work on our content and actually make sure that how we are tagging stuff up is making sense to the end users. It's making sense to the search engine and the bots that are traipsing through, in order to ensure that that content is discoverable. So, example that was used before was LinkedIn. So LinkedIn uses an ontology. It uses friend of a friend, which is a machine readable ontology. And so it knows who your friends are. So someone else connects to you, and all of a sudden it just starts pushing out these other things that may be of interest to you. You know, is this person of interest? Is that person of interest? Most of them connect to me and then try and sell me lead generation, which is something I really don't like, because people don't understand our industry. If someone is looking for a DITA component content management system, please contact me. That's fine, but don't contact me if you think you can provide me the names of 50 other people who want one this week. So this is where ontology is really working. So you see LinkedIn, really good example of bringing that through. And when we get to software, you've got things like OWL2. So OWL is the web ontology language. WOL obviously didn't sound as good as OWL, so it's known as OWL. It's a W3C standard for the semantic web. And then there's some tools that are out. A lot of these have come out, interestingly enough, out of education. So as you can see, Protégé that I mentioned earlier is from Stanford. There's other ones out there. Algred is quite interesting. I've been having a play with that recently, and the Toolkit. So there are tools that are out there that will help you build your ontology, but don't be ashamed or worried or frightened about contacting expert companies out there to give you that extra bit of support and guidance when it comes to creating this, because you may not want to spend all your time learning this, and you've probably got other things that you need to be doing at the same time. So I said I'd touch on ontology versus knowledge graphs, because at first glance they look very similar, and certainly if you start looking at pool party, knowledge graphs is going to leap up and jump straight in your face. So ontologies are generalized data models. They types of things that share certain properties but don't include information about specifics. So, you know, instead of describing your car and all its features, an ontology would focus on the concept of cars, trying to capture characteristics that they might have. So, power steering, 4 wheels. So that means that ontology can be reused and it can describe other cars. So one ontology could describe our Honda Civic from earlier, or it could describe a Cadillac or any other type of car. Whereas a knowledge graph is specific data, so it makes much more sense. And the easiest way I've found of showing the difference between these two, funny enough, since we're in the authoring environment, is a book. So here we have a simple ontology for a book. We've got the book, it's followed by another book, it's published, it's based somewhere, it's got an author, and there's a year of published there. So that actually applies to any book that we could come out with. So we look at that as an ontology. But if we look at this with a knowledge graph and we apply a book to it, so To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, you see that this is very specific data. So we know who has published this book, where it's located, drilling down on the location, who the author was, and obviously because it's published by it, it's a link back to the author, the publisher rather, and it's got a follow-up. So this book was followed up many years later, but again it's linked back. So you can see the knowledge graph is very specific information, whereas the ontology is looking, would support any book within that. So what I want to do now is I just want to switch to something, a different screen, hopefully. Hopefully this will work. So a couple of points along the way here, I've said, yeah, that's supported with a CCMS. So let's look. This is, hopefully this won't log me out. Let's just refresh to see whether it's going to log me out because I've not used it. So let me just log in. And although this is XDocs, which is our product, the functionality here should be available in any, I wouldn't say the word proper CCMS, but in any competent CCMS, you should have this functionality when it comes to managing your metadata and managing taxonomies and managing ontologies, and actually applying that to the content that you're creating. This just happens to be the web-based interface where within XDocs you set up projects and various other bits, which I'm not going to show you because I'm not trying to do an XDocs demo. But this is where we have this idea of extended metadata. So we think we're doing more with the metadata than perhaps some people do. So we start with schema, and you can see straight away that there's support for OWL, the web ontology language that we discussed earlier. I'm really hoping someone's going to say if they can't see this screen, it should be working. So we can import OWL files, but you can also export OWL files as well if you want, in order to share it with other systems. We like open source stuff. So along the bottom, we deal with prefixes, which are basically shortcuts of where data is going to be put. Have various classes of metadata. You might want to break things down. So we have here standard things like audience and platform and product. as classes, but then you would have metadata within that class. We have some definitions and some harvest paths. So with this particular system, every time you check a document or a topic back into the system, we go through and we scrape out any metadata that's been added to that particular topic, which is then used for search purposes. So if someone suddenly adds something as metadata, it's always picked up and managed within the system. So we talked about before where we were looking at a thesaurus. So here we have our thesaurus. It sits here. We can add. That's what I classify a bit. You know, I can add terminology to this if I want to actually bring something else in. Literally, just click add and put in a new term. So you can build your thesaurus up within your CCMS. We can import it in, and then we can play with it once it's in there in order to bring those new topics, those new pieces of metadata and things into the system. Kind of as easy as that. So we start putting stuff up, plus sign there, and we can put things under. We can nest things as well. We have battery. If I added something between under batteries, our new form of battery as an option here. So it's very easy to add and build and maintain. And likewise, if we suddenly decide we don't like something, we can actually delete it. Obviously, you'll get a warning if you delete things, but it's there in order that you can take stuff in and stuff out again. And then we have the ability to add metadata in a class level. So we've got this class of audience. So if I add that, we'll just call that. As a new type of user. So that gives us another type of user. So it's as easy as that. It should be as easy as that to add metadata into your CCMS so that you can then use that within your authoring environment. And as I said before, we've got this idea is we can harvest, decide what we do when content comes back in and scrape all of that back up into the system very easily. What that looks like if you were an author, let's just go to, let's just open a topic up. In oxygen author, which we're going to edit. I don't know what views people prefer here within oxygen. I've never been a big fan of tags. Let's just refresh the values. If I go to our audience now, I can just add that tag to this particular topic that we've got. So it's now tagged for use by CIDM webinar users. Check the document in. Probably made some changes just to make it a bit more interesting. But now that's gone back in. We know that's got that element there, and we can prove that. We've seen here we've got some search capability about within the database. Now I can search on various things. Again, I can search for content using the thesaurus. That's fine. I can add I've already got another screen. Let's go back there, sorry. Or I can change that, and if we go back up and I look for topics that have technician in there, not many. So these topics have all got user, but that one topic, oh, we haven't got any. Always refresh things. But that should have the CIDM user would be in that particular place. So that's some of a quick, literally a very quick look at what you would see if you support from within a CCMS. A proper component content management system should be able to support your thesauruses and your taxonomies and your ontologies and things as you go along. That's that slide. But this takes us back to this whole thing of, you know, what do you need? And it really is no different this week than it was 4 weeks ago. What you need depends on what you're trying to do and what the content is being used for. But even at the very least, do look at a controlled vocabulary. At the very least would be what I would say if you're working in DITA. But I would also say you do, again, as I have already said once or twice, you know, you don't need to know all of this stuff. There are people out there like Dawn, happy to teach you this stuff, but also happy to help you on your journey and actually help you find the right solution for what it is that you're trying to do, because no two companies are exactly the same. So your needs are probably unique. So if you accept that talking to people will actually help you find the right answer. And almost with a drum roll, we did have this idea of a reading list that was asked for before. It may be easiest we can send this out to all the attendees, if you like, just to actually help you on your way. But if you read all of these and read a lot more, you'll actually know as much as Dawn once you've read all of these several times and a lot more. But it takes you through. I mean, we all have favourites. As I said, there's quite a few on knowledge graphs, including the knowledge graph cookbook by Andreas. And if you go to the Pool Party website and you look at resources, you can download that as a PDF to read through that. I mean, that's not a. It's a big list. There are other books out there. If there's an author attending this at the moment and I've missed your book out, I apologise. Let us know and we can add it to this and share it out. But there's some very good books on that list, and if you were to read a couple, it will help your knowledge immensely. I think you can't learn too much about this, particularly as it's changed. You know, it's changing as we go along and go through it. I've gone a little bit quickly, I think, but we can move on to questions now. I've left Dawn and my email addresses up there as well, so do also share questions with us. And I'll hand over to Kathy to do questions.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. A lot of good information there. A couple questions were already answered in the question dialog box, so you may want to take a look at that. But here's one more. If our trusted sources or governance of terminology in thesaurus is, say, acrolinks or something similar, can we update the CCMS such as XDocs, use those as the trusted source for subsequent updates, or only for the initial ingestion into the CCMS?
Cool. Well, is that written down somewhere?
Yeah, it's in the Q&A box, Rick.
Yeah.
All right. Can I just read that whilst Dawn answers?
Yeah, there's a lot there. So essentially, they want to know if you're using a tool and you ingest it into your CCMS, can you continually to maintain it in the other tool and then keep importing it into the CCMS, or does it then have to be only updated in the CCMS?
I'll let you talk about what you're planning or are able to do with XDocs, but I can just say that there are several CCMSs that we know of that are working to integrate systems like Pool Party into them. There's a forthcoming announcement that is not mine to give that will be announced in about 2 weeks about one of those systems that is integrating directly in there. Where yes, then you would be able to, any updates that you make, for example, in Pool Party would be scanned, you know, for the places where that update needed to be made inside your DITA files in your repository and be made for you. And certainly there are the API side of things to be able to integrate those. If it hasn't already been built, that of course is going to take more effort. But what I've seen is a lot more effort on the CCMS side to start those integrations. Rick, what are you doing with XDocs?
Well, we are in communications with these companies actually as we speak and discussing further integration. Obviously, what you would get is the ability to import into XDocs to start off with, and the fact that we harvest metadata continually, any updates would be picked up, it would be picked up automatically into the system. And you'd then be, you know, you'd be using Pool Party, Backlinks, whatever, would be helping to guide your authoring as well. So the systems would mirror each other.
And there's also even possibilities there too, that it's not necessarily an update, but it would be, you know, if something is already tagged with this and this and this, add another tag, that type of stuff would all be possible through those kinds of integrations as well. I think a lot of that is still forthcoming. Kathy, I think we should go ahead, even though I answered it while typing. I think this other question in here about should you adopt an existing ontology is a good one to address. So do you want me to just do that?
Sure.
Okay.
Go for it.
So the question was that generally speaking, most organizations are creating their taxonomies and not really considering an ontology. You know, so they're not adopting an existing ontology, or they're developing a custom ontology. They're not doing those. They're just doing a taxonomy before they do any of those. And the question is really, should you adopt or develop an ontology before you actually do your taxonomy? And ultimately, if we're looking at adopting an existing ontology, I think that really depends on the company's domain. One of the things that I teach early on in our taxonomy class is go see what's already out there. Because there are definitely well-defined domains that have very powerful ontologies already there. And so you should really tie into that to get all of the power that we're talking about with an ontology that keeps you from having to custom build that or anything else like that, or try to figure out how the taxonomy you've developed is going to fit into that larger taxonomy. So an example is the financial industry has the FIBO ontology, which is very well defined. Financial industry business ontology is what FIBO stands for. So I guess saying FIBO ontology is redundant. But if there is something if you're very strongly rooted in a domain that has a strong ontology, by all means, you should start there to build, you know, to take advantage of all the relationships that are already built into that they already have that common language. They already have the, you know, generally speaking, the OWL structures and so forth already built. And so it's easy to tap into that and no need to reinvent the wheel. What I see right now still is that people aren't considering that, of whether they should do a taxonomy before or after adopting an ontology, because they're not really yet at a point of using, of really thinking what the semantic web with all of these ontological relationships could actually do for them. And most people are really focused when they're doing their taxonomy on basically, what is our product? You know, what are our product offerings? What are those relationships? Maybe mapping functions to products and things like that. But you know, so it's really within a very limited domain of this is our company and this is what we offer, as opposed to really thinking about how does it fit into a larger domain where you might want to see, you know, the full ontology that already exists. So I really think that, if you're really concerned about building the business business intelligence, that you need to do a lot of research into the ontologies that are already available and take advantage of those to really add that intelligence to your own content, and not just stay focused on our own little area, but really think about the whole domain that you might be part of.
Okay, Rick, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I fully agree with everything Dawn said then, actually.
Okay, good.
It is important to look what's out there, and consider the wider semantic web, which hasn't moved quite as quickly as people hoped it would. Again, within the XDocs, with the ability to import any on top, so long as it's created in hour, bring those ontologies into the system, and likewise, you should be able to do that with other CCMSs.
All right, here's an interesting question I wouldn't have even thought of, but given how the pandemic has changed our reliance on technology, is there more interest or arguments for improving our taxonomies or funding one to start with?
I would say that I saw a lot of increase in our consulting business on taxonomies well before the pandemic started. That I think we hit this kind of information overload. I think I could have said it was dozens of years ago that we hit it, but based on our consulting, I would say probably around 5-6 years ago, we started to see a massive increase of interest in improving taxonomies. That the big complaint that users have is that they can't find anything, and so people started going, "Oh, I need to improve my overall taxonomy to help people locate information." And so that spike happened a bit before the pandemic hit, but I don't think that's going to go away, or I don't know that it's been made any worse by the pandemic, but it certainly is a continued level of interest that we really need to make our content more findable. I mean, an interesting exercise that I have everybody do in my class as well is go out, even if you have a firewall system, so you know that your content isn't necessarily available through a Google search, do it anyway. Think about a question that somebody's asking about your that typically asks about your product, and search on Google to see what comes up. If your content is available, does it actually come up in any, on the first page in the top couple of answers, and see what else is out there that that is coming up that other people have posted. That right there starts to identify some of the issues and problems of what people are commonly trying to use their taxonomies for. Just simple searching, even beyond the relationships. Just do that and see what happens. People are really surprised by the results. I actually at one point went to a company, and when they found it, we did it in class, and I said, "Oh, look, these, all these matches that you come up right away in Google." And then all their faces were very upset because I had thought that was their website, and it wasn't. It was a similarly named website, but it wasn't theirs, and yet all their content was on these websites, and they actually initiated legal action because people were publishing their content on other websites. But so it is a surprising thing that you might find, but it's a good place to just see. Do we have any, do we even have just basic issues of whether our content can be findable, let alone the tapping into some of these other relationships?
I think following that, actually, with people, the pandemic is forcing people to work from home. And they're probably actually doing more searches outside of their office systems for information as well. And with content, as I had a slight rant about finding content, if you need to invest in the taxonomy in order to help people find the right content. Recently, I mean, we just redesigned the Bluestream website, and the company I was working with to do this actually went back through all of our old posts and put all of the posts back on the new system. And I was looking at some website monitoring software and looking, and one of the searches, it was a Google search, had taken someone to an announcement of our XDocs release version 1 in 2006, because a very old post had been put back on the system. And instead of someone finding the very latest information about the software, they found some very old information. And you don't want that sort of thing happening. And it can happen through reasons that you really least expect. So I think there is always an argument for investing in it.
Okay, kind of a follow-up question to that from somebody else is, does the size of the company you're working with matter with regards to how deeply you defined an ontology, taxonomy, or controlled vocabulary for their domain? For instance, is it, smaller coaching consulting business versus a growing startup that say their goal is eventually to be a market leader?
I think it's the business type is as much the steer there as to how deep or how complicated you go. If you're doing consultancy, you would go to a lesser depth than if you were a large manufacturing company with thousands of products for different industries. So the size of the company and the type of business is a definite impact on that.
I agree to a certain extent. I think really we get down to goals. So it doesn't necessarily, and in fact, the second half of the question really implies that of, okay, we have a small consulting business versus a growing startup that has a goal of eventually being a market leader, right? So, so it's not necessarily the size you are now, but potentially the goal. What are your goals with this, right? We're not just developing an ontology or even a controlled vocabulary because somebody on a webinar told you should, right? There needs to be a business reason for doing it, and what is that goal? Is to make your presence better known, to establish your expertise. Even as a small consulting firm, I am constantly going to getting on Kathy's back if we need to do more about how are we being findable in searches and those basic types of things, because I want to still be known as an expert, even if there's very few number of us. And so that goal is going to drive a lot of my decisions about how much time and money and depth and everything else that I do in defining all of my that whole span of the taxonomy up through ontology, just of what is my goal for it, right? So even though I'm small, I still may invest quite a bit into that depth.
Yeah, I would agree. I need to do more work on that, Dawn.
Yes.
More work,
And
Kathy.
now all of the people on this call now know that. So.
All right. So can you talk about the role of ontology and a controlled vocabulary in conversational communications and marketing, and the customer's experience personalization?
I think it's very important to have, if you're going down the controlled vocabulary route regarding the marketing message that you're trying to get across. You need to be consistent about what you're calling things, and the whole voice of the company really is reliant on that. I made 2 typos in that presentation. I managed to spell pool party wrong, which was bad of me, and I spelled acrolinks 2 different ways, which was also bad of me. And that sort of thing doesn't happen if you've got some software tools in place to try and catch those mistakes. And those mistakes can get out there. The further thing, really, take this into the future where you're looking at AI and the role that AI plays within your marketing. If you're starting to use bots to talk to people who visit the website and things like that, all of this is actually going to make that process much more effective than if you don't use a controlled vocabulary and you don't use these structures for your information, because it's going to make you, if you're using AI, it's going to make that AI work far more effectively than if you don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Consistency piece is an aspect of it, but I think also if we start talking about some of the customer experience personalization, the something even as basic as a chatbot, part of the parsing and so forth that's associated with a chatbot is understanding what the intent of the question was, right? So being able to parse the question, be able to understand that relationship and say, okay, if these kinds of words are here, this is what the intent is, and we should give an answer that has to do with how to, as opposed to what is, or that type of understanding is part of potentially what's built into your ontology. Is when we see these kinds of words, these kinds of phrases, that we can determine what is the appropriate response so that it becomes much more personalized to that particular customer.
And we have one of our participants on today's webinar is also doing a shameless plug for you to come to Convex, because Micah Ayataska is going to talk about knowledge assets. Oh, wait, no, wait, where is it?
That's right.
Yeah.
So, well,
Yeah.
I think.
Oh, it already, yeah, Rick already removed it, so it went into answered. He's going to talk about from micro content to neurons during one of those interview times. So he'll do a presentation, and then Dawn will have the pleasure of interviewing Michael on this topic. So it should be a great session. And of course, you'll also have the opportunity through the Slack channels to comment and ask questions on that topic as well. So we're excited he's going to be able to join us.
There'll be lots of good presentations at the event. So if people haven't already signed up, it's not too late. There you go. There's a shameless plug for you.
Thank you so much.
We'll take it. Yeah. So it looks like the questions are wrapping up a little bit here. And often when I say that, about 3 or 4 questions comes in. I don't know if that's going to happen today or not, but we will hold on for just a second here, see if anything new comes in. And if you, I'll just say if you came in late, we did talk about ComTech is going to be running a taxonomy workshop in May. And so you can go to the ComTech-serve SRV. Well, actually, you can see it in Don's email there on the screen. Go to that website and go to upcoming webinar or upcoming workshops, and you'll find details on that class.
And Kathy, I will confirm that we were asked to send the reading list from that slide that Rick showed. So we will do that. Everybody will get a follow-up and get that reading list.
Yeah, and I had put in the chat if anybody has any additional books they wanted to recommend, but it looks like Rick had a pretty exhaustive list there. So, because no one's added anything new to it. Yeah.
I've set my task of reading the ones that Kathy suggested, that Dawn suggested rather. So,
oh, Dawn.
That's my holiday reading.
Yeah, I've heard the accidental taxonomist come up numerous times over the years, so that must be a popular one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we're all doing things by accident. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us.
Yes. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Rick. And we will look forward to seeing you either virtually at Convex or at our next webinar. I think that's next week or maybe the week after. So bye for now, everybody.
Bye. Ah.